to comment. The question is more Hungary related. There is one thing which you haven't said that I think is essential. It's one thing to expect the EU to be more strict on financial administration of security. It's another thing, to monitor what's happening in Europe. So there is one thing which we felt really strongly in Hungary, and that is what can the EU do? How can we empower the EU for the future to be more powerful when corruption goes above the usual EU type of corruption, which is like in member states. I mean, I'm afraid that what's happening at the moment in Hungary is much closer to the Eastern type of kleptocracy than the gentleman's agreement type of corruption. What is happening now? There is a company group which is very close to the government party, which gets about one third of the public procurement, or maybe even more. Basically, the government party is using EU funds to incite against the EU, and I see big problems with it. I don't see EU institutions being empowered to go after these stories, and to expect Hungarian law enforcement agencies to do this work is just it's really naive. It's not happening. So really have an answer.
Okay, maybe we take three questions, and maybe you can stay a little bit shorter.
My name is Bodo Balázs. I'm curious about how you think about the role of the market. European countries are competing on a number of things like foreign investment, tax, higher education, and a number of things. What do you think? Do you think that internal migration can force countries to adjust their democratic potential? Because if they see that too many people are leaving because they're not happy with their country's democratic potential, then they will lose in a competitive situation. Do you think that's a potential solution rather than a top-down regulatory?
Thank you. Congratulations, Ukraine. The systemic breaches of the rule of law, I see it as cause as effects, not causes. And we should look at the electoral, political, ideological causes for these breaches. That brings me to kind of a missing link in our discussion, namely European party federations. From academic research and observations, we see that they're increasingly cohesive, they're increasingly important as European platforms, including for national parties. And in the two crises you were mentioning, Romanian and Hungarian, that it was exactly that thing that made a difference. In one case, there was support from the party family, Hungary, and in the other case, Romania, there was no support from the European party family socially, and that mattered. So I was wondering if we can explore the role of the European party federations as agents for democratic change, in the sense that one, they're present in the treaty, they have a responsibility, they get funding from all of us. That's another reason. And secondly, I think they can, as they become more powerful and more responsible, they can put some pressure on the national parties, a pressure that is not at the institutional level, but it's a very political level. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we move from Heather, starting with a question about the fundamental rights agency.
I'd like to come back on that last question, which I think is key. I mean, I think I just agree with Balázs and on this. So let's keep exploring it. Let's come up with a proposal. I think that's a very interesting idea. But no, I think also the point you made about the EU does have a very clear mandate to go over abuse of public funds, abuse of EU money. There it has sanctions, it has credibility, it has expertise. There are things it can do. It's not perfect, but that's the system. Even Mujahidi at the head of school did a very interesting article in Journal Democracy about the difference in how governance and democracy are actually they don't go together. And democracy can be functioning well while government goes down the path, and that the EU actually could go after government more effectively than democracy. So I think that's really engineering. But I wanted to come to this issue of the party families because something really big is about to happen in Europe that unfortunately runs in exactly the opposite direction as your very helpful comments. You're saying they can be a bulwark for democracy. I think what about to happen on the 22nd and 25th of May is that they're going to become a big part of the problem. So European Parliament elections are very likely to bring in 20, 25, maybe 30% populists into the EU. And well, one issue is whether the populists will get together and be effective in using Parliament as more than a giant YouTube channel, which is what they use it for at the moment. They just make a racist speech, announce the Roma, and then put it on YouTube. That's all they do. But once they're at 25, 30%, they can take over committees, they can write reports, they can use EU money. There's lots of other things they can do. So how will the mainstream parties react? Probably they'll try and form a grand coalition. And that will kind of keep the EU functioning, it will allow people to vote through. Sounds fine, but there is a large enough populism now within the mainstream parties. And having 25% populists in the parliament will bring out more populism in the overall debate. And the risk is that the mainstream parties, the EPP, the SD, I hope not the Liberals and the Greens, that won't happen. But there's a real risk that what you end up doing is just having a much more populist parliament in general. Which is reluctant to criticise national governments. Remember that the SD group hesitated a lot before they criticised Johnson. They started off supporting him and then realised they were getting into very deep water and then they withdrew. But if they could have kept supporting him, I think they would have done. It's not their instinct is not to call their members to account and uphold standards of democracy. The instinct is tribal. It's to protect their own and to maintain the number of members. They don't want people leaving their party family because that reduces the number of seats they have in the parliament, so reduces their power. The incentive structure is all wrong for them to be what you were calling for, which is to be actually an institution which protects standards and keeps their party members to a very high level. What the danger is that because there are very few mechanisms for party discipline in the parliament, there's no whip system, there's no also anything are not paid by their party grouping. As a result, what you can see is mainstream EPP members, even some of the SD members and others, just voting for populists quite regularly on a number of issues, on returns directives, on migrant, on the funding, on abortion, on gay marriage, on a huge range of issues. And the problem is that then the party families could just become a big part of the problem because they will defend the current system rather than calling for change. And that really worries me because it means that if we come back to the list we had earlier about who should be the guardian of democracy, the representative of the people in Brussels is going to be bring the whole system into disrepute if it starts to behave like this. And then what will the member states do? They'll find it difficult to get business through the parliament, so they'll start sidelining it and doing deals among themselves, or go to much more intergovernmental deals behind closed doors. This is not good for democracy at European level. It's going to exacerbate the democracy.
Just thought for a moment that we were on a positive track, but maybe Franziska on this issue, and then we have two questions, very short answers, reasonable short.
Yeah, on the EU and the funding, of course you can monitor, the Commission can monitor if there was a proper call for a proposal. But and then they can check if there are 5 cents missing. But what the EU cannot check is the substance and if there is any corruption behind it. And I was in the budget committee and I was negotiating for 2.5 years, the financial regulations, and we as a parliament trying to get in that the member states have to sign a declaration and say we spent the money in the intention of the, law that was adopted that brought you that money. Member states refused. They were vehemently opposing any responsibility for the money they spent themselves alone. Because with that declaration, the national parliament could have hold the government accountable on how they spend it. Really, that was a fight for 2.5 years. We lost it. The parliament didn't win in the end. And that is the craziness of EU funding, and that's why it's so likely to be used for corruption and petty. My friends get their money because there's no real control in it. You just have to make a proper call for proposals and then make sure that you spend the 5 cents correctly. The rest, nobody really checks. At least on European level, national parliaments can empower themselves to check it, but with the majority, then they usually don't. And that's a real problem we have at the European level. And we have been trying to get around it. We did not win. And I have to say, some other big member states were also not in favor of it. With every single government across Europe uses it to buffer up some difficult social good, um, and especially in the agricultural field as well. So that one, sorry if I have to, but it's just a fact I wanted to, if you can do it, it's fine. We would have to change the financial regulations once again. On the European Party, the funding rules for the party come up again. We as Greens try to get in some rules on, can you get the funding if you don't have some internal party discipline on democratic rules? Oh, very difficult to get there. But some public push on that would help too. And all depends, of course, on the courage of leaders. If Merkel says, I don't talk to Orban, that makes a much bigger difference than if, the parliament even votes on it. So I think it's a lot of responsibility of the leaders, but the funding rules might help. I'm not so optimistic about this one. And yes, the Grand Coalition, I think, there I share had an impression, we will have a Grand Coalition which will tighten them and will bring them even less in situations of criticizing anybody from their party. And yes, in the European Parliament, you can spend so much money as an individual member. It's beautiful if you have good ideas, but it's also terrible if you want to promote, non-democratic things, because nobody's checking, not your party. In the Bundestag, it's very different. I don't have a cent that I can spend alone. All the political groups. I hate it, but you're like, oh, you always have to get first agreement of your party group. But it's very different in the European Parliament. There's so much freedom, and you de facto you can do whatever you want, and every group wants you to stay in because you vote, and it's counting anyway. So, and on the Fundamental Rights Agency, you can't make it mandatory to ask them unless they have the mandate to do countries. We were in this already. The Parliament tried, but then they said no, unless the Fundamental Rights Agency actually has the mandate to do it, we can't make it mandatory. So it's sort of running in circles.
Okay. Jan Werner, or do you want to
just very briefly. So in here we have two cases where what we usually take to be vectors of democratization pointing in different directions. First, from the point of the market. So I think it's generally important that we don't discuss the EU as it was founded in the 50s. Clearly, it was founded peace and prosperity for market as well. Now, what the market, the free market, de facto does today is it allows countries to export their opposition. The most discontent are going to go to London, to Berlin, very different situation from the Cold War. We also have a situation, maybe less obviously, where as long as you're in that market, the EU will come ever so often and say, here's a bunch of essential neoliberal policy proposals that you have to implement. And then in the sense we now have a rival model which says, hey, if you want to make the gas cheaper, we're going to give you a lot of money. And we're not going to meddle internally with you at all. And you can still the prices very low, and you can get re-elected and you become very popular. I mean, think about Ukraine in that context. On the one side, the World Bank says you basically have to raise gas prices, the house programs, and you're going to do this, and then the right law. That's clearly not the whole story. I'm not saying but I think, especially if we think about strategy, what are we trying to achieve, and what are the instruments, and how does it look as part of the big picture? We can't do that. On the parties, very briefly, I agree with everything that's been said, but again, here, the push towards democracy, quote unquote, along the lines of now we can actually determine whether Martin Schulz or Juncker is going to be the president if it comes more democratic. At the same time, of course, if you are the EPP, makes you think twice about whether you now want to kick out Felix. So I think it's one gesture. Beforehand, it didn't matter all that much whether you had a couple of votes or not. All of a sudden, it could really matter whether you get that majority. So again, democracy is pointing in different directions.
That brings us to another question which we don't have time to discuss. The EU as a system, how democratic it is. But Andras, maybe also to the market.
Some very short remarks about the role of politicians. I think it's very important that they exert pressure on same market families. It's an important tool, but it's very unreliable. Cannot really be on that. The second, that the market can somehow control that situation, they cannot, because markets, financial markets, they pay attention to the very limited small area which has nothing to do with day one. question about the European public prosecutor, in theory, the EU does have the possibility to go after, you know, uh, the money corruption cases, but only in cooperation with the local police and only in cooperation with local police. Exactly why that works. But you do not have, and what would be needed is some kind of, you know, FBI type or European FBI type, and you know, the guys come and handcuff the politician and then they put away. And there is a proposal for that by Vivian Redding. That's on the table. She wants to do that, and that would be, I think that would be much more important than like institutions.
So now the proposals are getting more and more concrete, the European FBI. So we have more questions now. The questions have to be sort of speed and speed questions and speed answers. Yep.
Actually, I don't have a question. I have a remark because I'm grateful you kind of mentioned the issue of media freedom a few times, and European countries have initiated a European Citizens Initiative for media freedom and media pluralism, exactly for the reason that you've mentioned, and it was initiated in Hungary and Italy. And so, if you want to do something by walking out of this room, sign the media initiative, the European Citizens Initiative for media freedom.
Okay. Something concrete? Yes.
My comment about preemptive Euroscepticism, what Jan mentioned, I would like to add that certainly this was an argument even coming from the European Parliament that we should be very careful because whenever we intervene, it doesn't even Europe. Now, my comment is that actually it's not true, since the majority of the Hungarian population still is very pro-EU, and actually this freedom fight against the EU did not work very well by Fidesz. Something else worked very well yesterday, but it was not the anti-EU stance. Now, my question is about the future. It's more a Kremlinologist question. In case Orban will introduce a new constitutional change in 2 or 3 years, that he would become the new president of the republic, having all the competences of the prime minister right now. What the EU can do is, I understand all the problems you mentioned, legal, political family, and so on. What if the government, the parliament, in 2 or 3 years will vote for a new president, that's him, for 7 years? Whether there is any strategy or the momentum is out because of the new, more Eurosceptic parliament.
Thank you, Dieter Decker, Georgetown University. I'm very much in favor of Jan Miller's proposal to create a Copenhagen Commission, and there's another proposal to create a rule of law commission by the four ministers, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Finland. Now, that's all very good, and I think we need it in order to uphold standards and values. But here's my question. How can we better encourage pro-European forces in individual countries? And I think that's very necessary to think about it. Go back to the original, to the beginning of European integration, when we had these Jean Monnet committees. That was a civil society initiative, very effective. It included party leaders, unions, media, and that's a very important element of awakening new pro-European forces, and we have them everywhere, but they need encouragement. And I think it was a big mistake of the European Union to give up all civil society programs after states became full members. All these programs moved out to other areas. Nothing against it, trying to be more active in the Eastern Partnership, Southern Partnership, developing countries, but inside Europe needs encouragement. That's what I would like to ask you. Thank you. Okay, the media pluralism, we can deal with that straight when we walk out. Then the Orban in 7 years. Yeah, what will happen is that Orban is president and
or you could conceptualize the problem.
I think this is the thing. There is no agreement on this. There's no democratic hierarchy. There's no model for the EU to talk. I can tell you exactly what will happen inside the Commission when this thing gets put, if such a thing is put out. Because I remember this very well when the Turks started thinking about it. So I was in DG Martin at the time. And essentially what will happen is everyone in the Commission will go, okay, we have no acquis. Let's call the Venice Commission and get another opinion. That will also put off the issue by several months, and then we can work out what the member states think and see whether there's political support to criticise it in some way. And then let's see, are there any kind of legal basis that we can draw on? Probably not very much. And then when the Venice Commission report comes back, then we'll see how much room there is really to say, well, this is not in line with the best practices internationally, really the kind of model. But it will be that kind of thing, and it's not going to have a big impact. And by then, he'll be president. So, because, as Jan Bernard pointed out, in the 1950s, the EU was not set up to be a government of democracy. It was set up to be an economic integration project. Okay? So it was set up for one purpose, and the community of law is based on a particular purpose, the logic that this is about technical issues, and it's about economic integration, which over time will lead to more political integration. Functionist logic of the EU. It's a tank. It tumbles along very slowly. It works. But it's very hard to deflect it. It keeps going. 50 years it can go a very, very long way. It's kind of slow and steady and reliable. Not terribly exciting, but it kind of comes along. Now we're trying to give it wings and a jet engine and make it fly. Okay, it can't do it very well. It's never going to be aerodynamic. It's going to look like a brick that's flying. And then we're going to say, well, this is terrible. Look at the EU. Think about what is its purpose. Is it for its purpose? Now, if we wanted to do other things, you need to redesign it. You need to retrofit. And that retrofitting is quite ugly and it's quite cumbersome and it's very inefficient, it's quite expensive, and it may not work very well. I think actually what would make more sense probably, given we're coming up with radical ideas this afternoon, is in fact to try to create something between the EU and the Council of Europe, and do something in the middle. It doesn't have membership of Azerbaijan, Russia, Ukraine, and so on, but which has some kind of international standing. The problem is that international bodies no longer have the kind of standing that they used to. We're 25 years after the end of the Cold War. The idea of calling on an international institution to come and solve your problems is increasingly unpopular. I think Ben Berkowitz said this to me, we don't want international bodies coming and telling us how to do the right talk anymore. That era has kind of finished. And that's also for the new member states as much as for the old ones. So now we're on to new political terrain. My countries do want to sort these things out for themselves, but the constitution making is not an area where there's that much popular involvement. I think it really does have to come from below, it has to come from the grassroots. I'm quite pessimistic that in the end we're going to end up with some kind of international body, including at EU level, that can help very fundamentally with these heavy constitutional questions. It can help on some areas, and we've talked about a number of them today, but it's not going to solve the problem. That in the end is up to the people. And again, to quote the very interesting beginning the discussion this morning, the first session we had when Tomasz Gaspar said, if you are the embodiment of the nation, the definition is yours. This question of defining the nation is absolutely critical in deciding who gets to decide on constitutional provisions. And that's the real danger of the new nation-based populism.
I just heard from our German chairman that there's some more time. But coming to the question about the Monet committees and your idea of a Copenhagen Commission and the role of the Fundamental Rights Agency, maybe I combine this with the question, why don't you think the Fundamental Rights Agency is enough? We have an agency, it could be uploaded, it could be under Copenhagen Commission, why something new? Or your question, or your remark that something new between the Council of Europe and European Commission. Is it easier to use something which is already there than create something new?
Undoubtedly it is. The only thing is, as I'm trying to say multiple times, it's not all about fundamental rights. So we cannot in a sense redefine all the systemic problems as necessarily fundamental rights violation. The other thing is simply, like in a sense, about treaties. Coming up a little easier, but agencies So it's sort of in their DNA that they aren't just going to say what community is. I mean, I agree, it's great if we mandate and control, but even that it's a particular kind of institution called community. And that doesn't change overnight, even if we actually do what you said. Just very briefly, so I agree that more that could be done in terms of tools. We did very, especially with what we do. I think we should go back to the era where, oh, here's the issue. And that's what we need to do. All this of PR, which has its heyday in the run of I think we should go back to your question. Seriously, there's a question. In 1170 or 1800 years, and not about any stuff about all peace and if we're still on to that, then
And we have two last questions, or three. Okay, let's take the last three questions. Here, after Europe, there.
Thank you, Jens. I'm not working for the Venice Commission, but still my interest is of course I think Commission, I can be brief because it's something that's been discussed already. The question of whether there should need to be new institutions or not, whether there should be something perhaps between the Council of Europe and I would just make it key for trying to work as much as we can on the basis of it, rather than multiply new ones, because that's still the position. So we need to stop someday understand why each time rather than adapting working so certainly having a time position might not prevent any conditions for that matter. So just last point, there is some convergence already. If we take, for example, the upcoming session of the Europe, so certainly
Thank you. Nicolás Hanna, the Vice Chair, Legal Secretary of the in the morning session, in this session, a lot has been mentioned about civil society. Everybody has identified civil society as one of the most important stakeholders in the guardian of democracy and speaking as a civil society member. I think we should also try to think who is the civil society and whether they are also targeted within this general framework and system that is the public right in the moment and this paper. I mean, you have group health organizations working on different levels and different aspects and different issues. Normally, it could be a few committed individuals at the very grassroots level working on different on their vision on how they want to see society. You may have national NGOs, you may have European networks, our network, so and they work at national, European level, etc. But they are also targeted. They are also targeted, especially speaking on issues of racism and xenophobia. We have many of our members at the national level have been targeted for their work. We expect this to become a more serious matter, and we expect this to become also at EU level. We are afraid with the European Parliament elections and the rising, the far rising in the European Parliament, networks of NGOs working at European level to be targeted as well. We already had questions from far right representatives in the European Parliament about funding to the European network against racism. So we see this becoming a more serious concern. And I would like your views on how you would see civil society being strengthened so as to become a real stakeholder in the fight
in our Mali legislation, but in general, to support democratic processes and to support rethinking on how our democracies are going to develop. And by saying this, I just want you also to know that, I mean, the EU as institutions of the EU by themselves, they have a democratic deficit. I mean, there is a different treatment of civil society organizations, either in the Commission or the European Parliament or the Council. The Council has complete transparency. Nobody knows what is discussed and how it's discussed in the Parliament, and NGOs don't have their own say there. And also, whereas the EU has adopted a declaration on human rights defenders, for example, applicable in third countries, it does not have a declaration of human rights defenders for the EU. Apparently, it's considered that human rights defenders are free to act in the European Union, which is not the case. And we can bring many examples of criminalization of human rights defenders. So I wanted to give your
a very short question there, and then but short.
Yes. So the European Commission suggested, proposed in the draft of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive a binding rule that supervisory bodies, media councils, which supervise the media system in our member states should be independent. There should be safeguards to have those bodies independent. And this proposal, this provision of the proposal of the European Commission didn't make it to the directive. And this is why our European Commission couldn't require the Hungarian government in 2011 to change the law in regard to the Media Council, which has been one of the tools through which the government controls the media, which to a great extent contributed to the tragic election results yesterday. I wonder, how do you see this common failure of our European media policy? And I would like to add just very quickly that I think it really should not hide the either mistaken or hypocritical point that diversity in the European Union requires to leave it for member states, whatever way they want to regulate the composition of media content. I think that's mistaken and hypocritical. If anyone would come up with that explanation, thank you.
Okay, there we have an expert review can connect to each other. Kathi?
Yes, this is directed to Heather, since you've described the EU variously as a tank and a brick, and definitely not aerodynamic, and that you could not expect a timely reaction from the EU if Orban made himself president for life. What would be a triggering event that would elicit a timely reaction from the EU in the political realm? Can you speculate on what would?
The answer is there's no threshold because there's no rule book. It's not even a playbook on this, it's a new level. It's what other member states would consider to be unacceptable. It's a club, so it's about norms, it's about the unwritten rules of what's acceptable and unacceptable. There is the written rules in the form of the acquis, which don't have very much on democracy at all. And the unwritten rules are what other prime ministers cannot tolerate. If we came back to the whole question about who put somebody somewhere who makes the call, the overall political judgment of whether there is democracy. And in the end, that's the other member states. And that's why I'm so concerned about the rise of populism, because it brings down the bar overall in the EU. It makes all of the prime ministers feel under pressure from populism, feel under pressure to be more populistic in their own rhetoric, in their own dialogue with their own population. And therefore they will hold others to lower standards. So that's why I think the trigger goes up higher, because the threshold has come down, the trigger goes up higher, and they're very reluctant to do it. What would be considered a shocking event, like forming a coalition with a far right party with an openly racist agenda, as happened in 1999, is no longer shocking. It's fine. It's okay. Nobody even split. You can think about Denmark in the early 2000s with the Danish People's Party. Think about what's happening in Slovakia now. And so, sort of the norm, the overall sense of what is
is changing in Europe. And I think the only way to deal with this is not creating EU level rules, because there's benefits to sort of degree on it. It's actually to raise the kind of debate about democracy in the community. So here I have a proposal for you. I have a new job for political theorists and political philosophers, of which I think there are quite a few in the room, including one next to me. I think it's really helpful to have the kind of proposals that you're putting forward, young learner, just to remind people of how much the debate has changed, on how in the 90s this was considered really routine, really normal. That what's normal in politics is changing around us, and we're kind of, with the frog in the water that's slowly heating up, we're kind of unaware of how much this is already affecting our democracy. And so it's really important now, I think, to have perhaps not so much a commission of elderly statesmen and legal experts, as to have a commission of philosophers discuss what is democracy in Europe today. And in particular, to put out a list of what is unacceptable, what is not democracy. At least if we could have a negative list, that would be a good start.
Let's enter the final round.
So Plato would approve. Theorists always have great anxiety about your presence. I know, but thanks for skipping us, right? So just on the, actually, just one way to mark on this point. So I agree with you. A lot in terms of we don't really know what scenarios would be. Probably it is true that we would no longer say that Article 7 is a nuclear option if tomorrow about the kernel in some countries say the full-time ban. So it's not impossible to imagine certain scenarios. At the same time, I'm not entirely convinced that it's always like the EU in the context of Europe is not fantastic. It was not enough to have a seat at the table to say that we are concerned about this and so on. So, and I think people are aware of this. They're also aware of interdependence in a way they weren't aware of interdependence before the development. So just desperately trying to finish it. I think we also use this one, of crisis, give a cliche. But in a sense, it is a very peculiar moment. I mean, there is a sense that nobody can deny anymore the matter, that it can really never realize in the big one. And people remember that the Russian movement is accepted this from the economic to a degree that was unthinkable 10 years ago. There's a kind of space for debate about politics. But at the same time, I think it's not, I agree with you on the debate, against that. But I think ultimately it will need some authoritative body and call it strong. And debate is relevant. But we need to ask ourselves whether we ultimately are willing to empower such a body or not. And if we say we're not willing to do that, we have to think through the consequences for us as individual European citizens. It means that you will be governed by person X in country Y, and you can do what you want to do. I don't think that's a democratic process anymore. And it becomes anything about it.
So, Francisca, I count on you to continue this political trend.
Yeah, I first have to disagree on the truth of on the question of populism and standard of governance, I have the impression that it was not the pressure from populists, but mainstream parties putting up populist proposals and then making them completely acceptable and therefore pushing off populists out. And I've been seeing this right now in Germany with the CSU, Bavaria, putting up proposals which are definitely populist. And then everybody's surprised why the AfD, the anti-European party in Germany now is gaining in votes. I think it's really the problem that we have with mainstream parties. And I think the pressure is, could be stood if they really wanted. On the question of the media law, I can just say, the majority is decided in the European Parliament and in the Council. If you want to have a majority, you have to vote it. You have to go to vote. That's the only answer I can always give. I mean, it's a majority. And this is defined by you and by us, across Europe. And you already in Hungary have a bit more influence than those in Malta or Cyprus, also on the Fundamental Rights Agency, I think when I'm talking about enlarging the mandate, I'm enlarging it from fundamental rights also to democratic principles. So that would be my idea saying we have an institution there, it has smart people there, it's sort of recognized. And I don't believe that any institution you will create at European level will be more independent than an agency. It will always be depend to some extent on member states. Don't fool yourself. Yeah, I very much agree with Heather. After all, in the end, it always depends sort of it goes to where the member states also what they are ready to accept. In the way to believe that if you then have a new commission who will completely independent of member states, I just don't believe it. And I think sometimes it's easier to change something than to create something new where member states will be, oh my God, what is this now about? They're going with something they are maybe used to. And then the question of the financial, that I very much agree. We're not a club. We go on, we go into Greece and ask them if they know what the sanctions are about. They very much know how sanctions work and what they have to do. And we, actually, as Greens, always argue to link that to the pressure of rule of law and anti-corruption. Because people, last week, they liberalized the milk market by the expiry date of the milk was in Greece 5 days, and now it's 7 days, so that the industrial milk products can come in because 5 days they can't keep. So that was the liberalizing of the milk market, which was, heavily discussed in Greece, will destroy all the small milk farmers, and is, very successful EU policy. And we believe that fundamentally Greece has a much more deep problem of corruption, of a captured state, and as long as you don't target that, you will not get Greece out of crisis. So we always said, why don't you listen to, you have such a huge tool, why don't you put it up there for anti-corruption board instead of reforming the milk market? But that we didn't have a lot of majorities behind us because everybody was afraid that once you become target country, you will actually have to give up on your corruption and on your high levels of nepotism. Much easier to reform the milk market than going against corruption in your own country. So that's, I think there could be potential for actually leverage. It's of course not for all countries, but already there we didn't use it. And I think if we don't go, what will get young people or Europeans again to believe in Europe? I think it's the human rights, democracy, freedom agenda. I really believe it. And I think if we don't go there, if we don't make everybody aware that this is the union that defends your individual rights, and your right to democracy, I don't know what we're going to go about. Because that's going to come with populism, right-wing people, racists rising up. If the EU doesn't take this as an objective of its, of its being, I think it's lost a huge opportunity. And I'm very worried about the attack on civil society. We have this, the Citizens Initiative, which just won 1 million, is the one to stop funding to those organizations, civil society organizations that do sexual health education. And I think this is terrible. This is terrible. We will stop all the counseling on the pill, it's scary. And this will target a lot of NGOs. I'm very worried about it. It's the Catholic Church behind it. It's very well organized. It was in all the churches across Europe, and it had the 1 million in no time. And they're planning many more against homosexuality, and there are many more in the pipeline. And if we don't build up against this, we will, really be losing out.
Okay, Andras?
Just two very short remarks. One is, why was the committee of wise men successful? It was successful, I agree with that. I think it was successful because everybody just wants to think everybody knew that doesn't work. The European government, they got into this boycott and they just didn't know how to get out of it. That was in the face. That was excellent for everybody and those stuff. So there was actually no conflict. If you have a conflict, then you need a court. The second remark is about civil society. You also mentioned it, that it's we always hear that for democracy you need civil society, and you do need it because civil society has to spread certain information, has to conceptualize problems within society, but we have to know that civil society actually has it's under three. 10 of you, we just have a new small society, and we say that we speak for and it's clear that in a huge variety of groups, it doesn't really matter. The secondary importance, how big that group is and how representative that is. What is really representative society is not but that sense is hugely undemocratic, and it has important rule, informal rule in present idea. Other things that I would be very crazy if any, stronger formal rule.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the panelists here. That was a very rich discussion. I think we finished on a semi-positive note. I'm a big fan of positive self-fulfilling prophecies. So maybe we are at the start of it. At least we will continue the discussion actually tomorrow also in Berlin on specific things. As a moderator, I did terribly because we are half an hour late. But I would remind all the German speakers here that we had a great television show called Wetten Das, and they always extended, and then they were doing well, and now they always finish on time and they get axed by the end of the year. So maybe with that, thank you. And